Society under siege. How anxiety and propaganda control us. For centuries, entire societies have been swept away by powerful illusions that defy rational explanation. Even the sharpest minds can find themselves trapped when fear, confusion, and isolation converge in a devastating mental storm. In these moments of collective turmoil, a phenomenon lurks beneath the surface, one so insidious that it can destroy entire civilizations from the inside out. This is the haunting world of mass psychosis, where delusions become the norm and reason withers in the shadow. Many have asked how intelligent groups can suddenly believe the unbelievable, or even surrender their lives to leaders who peddle fantasies wrapped in fear. The answers are as complex as they are unsettling. By examining the roots of this psychological epidemic, from historical witch hunts to modern technologies that stir panic at the slightest provocation, we uncover a pattern. Fear primes the mind, confusion reigns, and isolation seals the deal. But what if there is a way to step off this treadmill of terror? Let's investigate the silent pull of mental contagions and how, time and again, they've blurred the line between reality and deception, leaving entire communities at the mercy of power-hungry elites. The invisible epidemic of the mind. Illnesses of the body can be identified by outward symptoms, coughs, fevers, and visible wounds, but diseases of the mind are far trickier to diagnose. When a group succumbs to a shared illusion, it behaves much like an epidemic. Instead of germs spreading from person to person, it's fear-driven stories, propaganda, and half-truths that infect. Hysteria passes from neighbor to neighbor, forging a chain reaction of paranoia. In medieval Europe, rumors of witches prowling the countryside ignited terrifying hunts that led to scores of innocent people facing condemnation. In other eras, entire villages succumbed to dancing manias, fits of uncontrollable movements and frantic worship, triggered by a collective emotional fever. Each episode demonstrates that human minds are open vessels, ready to be filled with either reason or delirium. And when that delirium is stoked by disturbing images and illusions, it spreads like an uncontrollable blaze. But these events aren't merely relics of the distant past. History repeats itself with uncanny precision. Sometimes we call them cults, sometimes extremist movements. And in modern times, they can even masquerade under benign titles like social safety initiative. Yet the pattern remains. Illusions seep into the public consciousness, fracturing communities from within. But this was only the beginning of how deeply minds can be. Fear as the key catalyst. Take any stable society, and you'll see that fear is often the first crack in its foundation. It doesn't matter if the threat is real or fabricated. What counts is the emotional turmoil it unleashes. Fear scrambles normal judgment, causing individuals to cling to any authority figure offering salvation. Repeated warnings that the sky is about to fall can paralyze critical thought, making the masses ripe for manipulation. Certain regimes throughout history have perfected the art of fear. They expertly craft external enemies or amplify existing dangers until people are too rattled to question the narrative. In the 20th century, totalitarian governments capitalized on economic collapse or social unrest to magnify a sense of impending doom. Faced with the specter of endless catastrophe, rational dialogue took a back seat, replaced by impulsive acceptance of extreme measures. In these scenarios, leaders can stage waves. Periods of high anxiety are followed by brief. People sigh in relief, only for a new, often more intense wave of dread to crash over them. This cycle steadily grinds down mental resilience. Exhausted by constant alarm, people grow too weary to ask whether the threats are inflated or real. They simply want an escape. Still, fear alone isn't enough to make an entire society abandon reason. The role of propaganda and fear softens the mind, but propaganda is the virus that seeps in once the defenses are low. When official sources, or those posing as official, spew contradictory reports, twisted data, and outright fabrications, they create a baffled public struggles to separate fact from fiction. Before long, confusion morphs into resignation. This systematic disorientation is sometimes called menticide, meaning the killing of the mind. In a society on the brink, relentless waves of misleading information erode confidence in any objective truth. Everything is questioned, and the only constant is confusion. As frustrated citizens look for a lifeline, more disinformation is offered, choking any attempt to stabilize the public psyche. Modern technology amplifies these techniques. Through social media feeds, 24/7 news cycles, and online forums, disinformation travels with lightning speed. One post claims a crisis is imminent. The next downplays it as a hoax. Algorithms push sensational or polarizing content, heightening anxiety. People become overwhelmed by data overload, yet starved for genuine clarity. In this environment, those in power have a golden opportunity. Unable to parse reality, many citizens submit to whichever authority speaks the loudest or most convincingly. All the while, any dissenting voices risk being censored or marginalized. Once the masses realize they can't tell truth from deception, they're left disoriented and primed for manipulation. Once confusion sets in, isolation is just one more step in this process. Isolation and the disruption of healthy communities. Isolation might look like a personal choice, someone withdrawing from society, skipping social events, or cutting back on face-to-face contact. But in times of manufactured crises, isolation often becomes whether through formal rules, suffocating social pressure, or orchestrated fear campaigns. The reason is simple. A fragmented community has a far weaker defense against widespread illusions. When people can no longer gather to discuss doubts, share experiences, or find mutual support, the corrective power of honest conversation fades. In normal circumstances, a skeptical friend might poke holes in a sensational rumor, or a relative might bring evidence that contradicts a panic-inducing headline. But if strict isolation sets in, those corrective checks and balances Historically, totalitarian regimes knew the value of forcing people to keep to themselves. Political prisoners were often placed in solitary confinement to make them more obedient. They were cut off from the reassuring presence of others who shared their doubts. The same principle can be applied on a societal scale. If everyone is locked in their own private bubble, the official narrative, no matter how illogical, gains a monopoly on the mind. Technology, ironically, can deepen this sense of isolation, even while connecting everyone online. Virtual chats lack the human warmth of face-to-face gatherings, making it easier for fear and disinformation to spiral. Without in-person body language and empathy, misunderstandings and hostility multiply. Soon, the population becomes not just physically distant, but psychologically estranged from one another. So, when fear, confusion, and isolation converge, the result can be startling. The descent into totalitarian thinking. In these conditions, the promise of order becomes a siren song. Citizens, exhausted by ongoing crises, look for a unifying force. If a charismatic leader or ruling class steps up with grand solutions, many will accept the terms without hesitation, regardless of how constrictive those terms might be. It's a trade-off. Surrender personal freedoms to regain a sense of security and direction. This is where totalitarian ideologies find their foothold, whether under the banner of saving the nation, protecting society, or restoring peace. Leaders can channel the collective anxiety into a single movement. It becomes easier to demonize anyone who questions this movement as a traitor or a disruptor of harmony. Worse still, those who remain quiet out of fear enable the system to solidify its hold. We've seen similar trends in modern times, albeit at different scales. Political leaders worldwide know that an undercurrent of terror, be it about external threats, economic collapse, or health scares, serves as a potent motivator. Citizens who once prized personal liberty might suddenly champion strict surveillance or draconian control measures if they believe it's the only way to avert chaos. But how does this all become normalized and accepted by the masses? Psychological regression and blind obedience. When societies lose their grip on reality, many individuals revert to a state resembling childhood dependence. In psychology, this regression suggests a longing for a parental figure to handle the complexities of life. People crave reassurance, guidance, and protection, qualities they project onto the leadership. This dynamic can become so powerful that logical contradictions in official statements are overlooked or explained away. Gradually, the rulers achieve an almost sacred state. They are believed to possess deeper knowledge, moral superiority, or even a divine right to rule. Meanwhile, the public relinquishes personal responsibility, content to be told what to believe and how to behave. This shift is not just a political maneuver, but a profound transformation of the collective psyche. Fear and uncertainty prime the mind, and blind obedience. Countless psychological studies warn. Childlike submission to authority rarely leads to peaceful coexistence. It opens the door to a stifling environment where creativity, dissent, and critical thinking are stifled. Ironically, this stasis seldom produces real security. Instead, it fosters a latent tension, a sense that something is deeply amiss, but too frightening to confront. Yet, beneath the surface lies a stark reality that often leads to suffering. It opens the door to a stifling environment where creativity, dissent, and critical thinking are stifled. Ironically, this stasis seldom produces real security. Instead, it fosters a latent tension, a sense that something is deeply amiss, but too frightening to confront. Yet, beneath the surface lies a stark reality that often leads to suffering. Historical examples and modern parallels. Time after time, we see how illusions can morph into violent or oppressive actions. Consider the witch hunts of the 16th and 17th centuries. Fueled by superstition and religious hysteria, entire towns turned on suspected witches in a frenzied bid to root out an unseen evil. Some believed that torturing or executing these supposed agents of darkness was a necessary sacrifice to maintain order. In the 20th century, totalitarian states like Nazi Germany or Stalin's Soviet Union weaponized paranoia about traitors, capitalist spies, or ideological subversives. Citizens were encouraged to report neighbors and even family members. This turned entire nations into surveillance networks, with fear pushing people to comply. The illusion was that absolute loyalty to the regime promised a safer, purer society. In reality, it led to mass suffering, lost freedoms, and countless tragedies. Modern parallels can be seen in places where the internet and social media have become battlegrounds of disinformation. Divisive narratives about political factions, identity groups, or urgent crises swirl daily. In some regions, you'll find entire communities locked in echo chambers, lobbing accusations across digital divides. Others wholeheartedly accept heavy-handed governance if it claims to shield them from danger. The result is a population that might remain physically free, but whose thoughts are deeply ensnared. And even when the writing is on the wall, escaping the collective delusion is never easy. Can we break the spell? Fortunately, mass psychosis is not an unbreakable curse. Resistance begins with individuals who refuse to let fear dominate their decisions. By questioning official narratives and seeking multiple perspectives, they safeguard their sanity. These are the people who say, "Wait, let's verify that," in the face of sensational headlines. They rely on trusted networks and personal observations rather than blindly swallowing media-fed narratives. Countering a collective trance also involves forming robust communities, both online and offline, where open discussion is prized. Satire and humor can puncture the self-importance of demagogues, revealing them as fallible. Ridicule, when aimed at propaganda and power-grabbing tactics, deprives them of the aura of infallibility they crave. Some thinkers refer to alternative structures or parallel structures as vital lifelines. These can be grassroots organizations, independent media channels, or informal gatherings that nurture critical thought. They function as small pockets of sanity within a larger environment of delusion. Over time, these independent-minded networks may inspire others to question the status quo, creating momentum for broader social awakening. Ultimately, reclaiming autonomy over our minds demands courageous action on the part of many, not just a few. If entire populations rallied to defend personal liberties and champion transparent governance, the manipulative architecture of mass psychosis would begin to crumble. But doing so means confronting the fear, confusion, and social fragmentation that initially fueled the madness. It's no small task, yet history is filled with examples of communities that overcame oppressive regimes once people stood together. It all comes down to one final takeaway. Mass psychosis might seem like a distant threat, tied to medieval superstitions or the nightmares of the 20th century. Yet its seeds are with us whenever terror erodes reason, confusion supplants clarity, and isolation drives us apart. These conditions allow illusions to flourish, giving rise to manipulative leaders and a population all too ready to trade freedom for security. But at every stage there's a choice. We can choose to think critically, challenge unfounded claims, and reconnect with one another rather than hide in silos of solitude. We can confront the illusions we encounter instead of falling prey to them. If we maintain this vigilance, we stand a chance of preserving not just our sanity, but the dignity and freedom that make life worth living. So the question lingers. In a world overflowing with fear, can we resist the steady drumbeat that urges us to close our minds and follow the loudest voice? Or will we succumb to the lures of totalitarian thinking, believing it offers some easier path through the tumult? The answer, in many ways, belongs to each of us. It's the personal choice that determines whether we stand as guardians of free thought or become passive subjects in a world consumed by illusions. Do you think mass psychosis is happening? Let us know in the comments.